Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim, Surah Bani-Israel, chapter 17, verses 16 to 22 will be covered today. The values applicable to the physical struggle in this life. We will cover some aspects of it because there is one verse in which this aspect is covered. These are the references, and this is our contact in case there is any query, question, comment, on this presentation or any other presentation. We can also discuss any point on our WhatsApp forum. Recap previous verses which we covered from 9 to 15. The Quran contains guidance for Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen to establish Deen, and this system has all the hallmarks of stability, balance, prosperity, strength, and growth overall, as well as individually to bring out his best. To those who wish to live life at an animalistic level, and Quran calls it a life of kufr. The Quran also explains the flaws in their psyche and warns them that their path in life will ultimately lead to their ruin and humiliation. Because life has a higher purpose, and Quran asks us to accept Iman in it after going through it rationally and reasoning it, and then accept the permanent values, and that will set us on a different path of life. The desire to obtain quick results for one's efforts is kept within man, and he needs to overcome this temptation and should always view the long-term effects of the choices he makes in life. This is an important point which we observe all around us, and in fact, before coming to the Quran, we all had this tendency to go for quick results. And this point should be made clear to others as and when we pass on the message of the Quran. In the alternation of day and night, there are signs for mankind, and this also creates time so that we can keep count of the years, so that we become conscious of the passing of time. This reminds us that our physical life in this world is finite. Every human being is accountable for his deeds as per the law of requital. The scroll of deeds of every human being keeps updating as life continues to be lived. And this will present itself as an evidence at some point in the future. Everyone carries his own burden, and this is how the system of Deen needs to be organized so that people willingly and enthusiastically carry out their duties in order to get the best out of their latent potentials. An overview of today's presentation. First point is, nations which do not follow the permanent values have an expiry date beyond which they decline, and depending on the circumstances, they cease to remain effective in worldly affairs. The pattern for their destruction is that elites in power start to cause chaos and imbalances within the society, which ultimately leads to their destruction. Human history is a witness to this fact that nations rise and fall in the world, and this is based on the functioning of the law of requital of Allah. Those people who wish to acquire the immediate benefits of life, they can obtain these if they follow the physical laws governing the means of sustenance. And this also requires the understanding of the man-made systems in which they are living. However, if these people and nations do not follow the permanent values and instead live life as if it will end with their physical death, then they turn their worldly life into a Jahannam. Because everything we do has consequences, i.e., chaos and gross imbalances are the signs of such an existence. Allah has made His bounties available to all in this phase of human life in the world. People can benefit from these by gaining knowledge about the laws applicable to these means of sustenance. Those who utilize these means of sustenance by keeping the divine guidance in view, they are the ones who are declared superior in rank, and they do not associate any other law with the laws of Allah. Let us go to the first verse of today's presentation, 17:16. The human psyche of self-destruction is explained here. وَإِذَا أَرَدْنَا أَن نُهْلِكَ قَرْيَةً أَمَرْنَا مُتْرَفِيهَا فَفَسَقُوا فِيهَا فَحَقَّ عَلَيْهَا الْقَوْلُ فَدَمَّرْنَاهَا تَدْمِيرًا. The law of Allah for the destruction of nations is that when they prefer comfort and desire to acquire maximum wealth and material goods without toil and effort. They become hedonistic and acquire a capitalistic mentality, and in this way, abandoning the correct path which has appeared before them clearly, adopt wrong paths. Then they become deserving of destruction, and then they are annihilated in such a way that no trace or sign of them remains behind. Further reflections on this verse. This verse concisely summarizes the period which is spread over centuries of the process of decline of any powerful nation. A historical evidence-based fact. The translation of the verse is as follows. I thought I should share the translation as well, because when we compare the meanings which I have given earlier from Mafhumul Quran and the translation, we will see that the language totally is different, because once it comes to meaning and interpreting this verse, then it has quite different meaning than the impression we get from these translations. When we decide to destroy a nation, we send a definite order to those among them who are given the good things of this life and yet transgress, so that the word is proved true against them, then we destroy them utterly. We have seen the meanings of the verse, and we can now observe that Allah has related the conduct of this nation to Himself, i.e., the effects of the laws of requital and respite when these are not followed by nations in the world. Verses such as this need to be correlated with other verses, like Inna Allaha la yazlimun nasa shayyan walakinna nasa anfusahum yazlimun. Surely Allah does not do injustice to people, but it is people who do injustice to themselves. Because the translation appears as if it is Allah who is doing it, whereas in fact it is His laws which are doing this and producing these results for going on the wrong path. The question may arise that why has this kind of language been used by the Quran? When the Quran invites us to use our intellect and reasoning potentials to their maximum, then it has to be laid out in a way which makes it possible to bring out our very best in terms of our cognitive abilities. And we will look at this aspect later in some slides. Few more comments on this verse. Secondly, we cannot pick and choose verses to serve our own biases and proclivities and thus remain misguided all our life by thinking emotively that I need to please Allah through these rituals so that He does not punish me. I've seen people quoting verses which are translated as Allah does whatever He wishes, and from this they have a dictatorial concept of Allah like that of earthly dictators at various levels of the society. And these beliefs do emerge or come out of these translations, because if people are not correlating these verses, then they can be misguided. Let us now analyze the verse in some detail, keeping in mind the law of the rise and fall of nations. Firstly, it states that وَإِذَا أَرَدْنَا أَن نُهْلِكَ قَرْيَةً. If the people of a nation have reached that stage in the functioning of the law of requital, where due to their unjust and tyrannical conduct, their elimination in the world becomes due. Because over here, Quran says that when the destruction of a nation becomes due because of their own deeds, and that is how we should look at it, that because of the laws of Allah, because these people went against His law, that is why they reach a stage of self-destruction. And we can relate to it in today's world very easily. Secondly, then Quran says, Amarna mutrafiha fafasaku. The rich and powerful there reach the stage of creating chaos and conflicts in the land, that where they manage to cross those limits of the law of respite, beyond which the time of their annihilation arrives. This is a sign to be observed in the world in which we live as students of the Quran. Here again, we are invited to look for signs of tyrannical behavior of the people in power. For example, and I've put down some points here: injustices, exploitation of the weak and poor, imbalances in every aspect of society, child abuse, domestic violence, creation of poverty across the world, accumulation of wealth, creation of conflicts and wars, turning people out of their homes, promotion of promiscuity, and it goes on and on. And as students of the Quran, we can pick up these things very easily if we use the Quranic light. Now, continuing on this verse, thirdly, the Quran says, فَحَقَّ عَلَيْهَا الْقَوْلُ. The word, that is law of Allah, comes to do its assigned job. And this is part of the manifestation of haq, i.e., to replace batil when it crosses the laid down limit and its time of respite ends. And we know in another verse, Quran says that with Allah, His words don't change because His laws are immutable. Together with this, we can note this aspect that there has to be another force to replace this nation which has transgressed all limits. If another nation does not emerge to counter it, then this process will become delayed and this process may continue for centuries. So it is important in human world that another force for good should rise as well. And this is the duty of Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen, that they should rise and establish themselves, acquire power, and then they act as counterbalance to the forces of batil. Fourthly, Quran says, فَدَمَّرْنَهَا تَدْمِيرًا. Then they reach that stage where their elimination becomes due and they are destroyed completely. They cease to remain effective in the land. And that is important. Destruction does not mean that these people totally disappear, but they become ineffective. The wrongs they were doing, they are stopped from doing those wrongs. Their destruction and ruin could take many shapes and forms. For example, if a nation is too powerful, then the cancer could spread from within. And this could be economic collapse, internal strife, breakdown in law and order, social unrest, and extremely corrupt and inept leadership comes to the top, becoming involved in never-ending external wars. Fear and huzn becomes multiplied among such people. We can easily relate to the state of the world in 2024. Let us go to the next verse, 17:17. The human history helps to understand the laws of Allah. وَكَمْ أَهْلَكْنَا مِنَ الْقُرُونِ مِنْ بَعْدِ نُوحٍ وَكَفَى بِرَبِّكَ بِذُنُوبِ عِبَادِهِ خَبِيرًا بَصِيرًا. Bring word history in front of you and see how many nations there were after Nuh, which we destroyed in the same way according to our law of requital. Your Rabb remains well acquainted with the crimes of His servants. He sees everything. No one's deed can remain hidden from His sight. Some reflections on this verse. After referring to some signs appearing prior to the destruction of a nation, here the Quran has quoted the example of the messenger Nuh from the earliest of human history. Even today, people mention the famous flood faced by the nation of Nuh, which destroyed them as a consequence of their misconduct. Then it is said, look at all the other nations from history which became destroyed due to their own injustices and inequities to which their own hands contributed. Allah did not cause their destruction, they themselves contributed to it. The verse sums up the functioning of the law of requital in a very subtle way by stating, كَفَى بِرَبِّكَ بِذُنُوبِ عِبَادِهِ خَبِيرًا بَصِيرًا. Enough is your Rabb to note and see the crimes of His servants. The law of requital does not spare anyone. It is related to the attribute of Rabb, i.e., this is part of the system of Rububiyat. Because if the tyrannical and bad nations, evil nations which follow batil, these are not replaced by another nation which is better, then there will be a lot of chaos and bloodshed in the world. And Mu'mineen need to understand that the law will provide them with support if they stand up for deen. By mentioning Zamb, the root of Zunub, which means tail, crime, sin, false allegation, meanness, etc. The verse points to the wrong and evil things committed by human beings which become a hindrance on the path of Rububiyat. Two divine attributes conclude the verse, i.e. Khabiram Basira. While Allah is aware of all this, we also need to be fully aware of what is going on in the world. So it is important as students of the Quran that people should be well aware of what is going on in the world, because then they get enough signs before the decline of a nation starts and steps can be taken and see what can be done after the destruction of such people. Let us go to the next verse, 17:18. The psyche of going for immediate benefits of life creates imbalances. Man kana yuridul ajilata ajjalna lahu fiha ma nasha'u liman nuridu summa ja'alna lahu jahannama yaslaha mazmuman madhura. From this, the question which will arise in your hearts is that when the law of requital of Allah is so firm and trustworthy, then how do those nations who neither accept the permanent values nor have Iman in the life of the future keep advancing materially? And this is a very important doubt which arises in our hearts, in our minds, that why these nations who are doing so much bad in the world, evil in the world, and why something is not done against it. And the answer is here. Its cause is that our law is that whoever wishes to acquire immediate physical material benefits and makes efforts for these according to the physical laws, we bestow these material benefits according to our law of Mashiach, which we have made like this through our choice and intent. And this is the way the domain of Amr of Allah functions, because law of Mashiach says that people should be given time to act on whatever choices they make till the time they are caught by the ill effects of their own acts. And that is called the time of respite. The farmer who works hard and sows crops according to our physical laws, he receives the recompense for his efforts. There is no distinction in this between kafir and mu'min. But after this, in the life of the future, there is a Jahannam of destruction for that nation, in which it is made to enter in a reviled and rejected state. Further reflections on this verse 17, 18. This life of ours has two parts. There is the physical aspect in which everyone is equal, and this functions under physical laws. Whoever has acquired knowledge of these laws and can work in accordance with them can benefit from them individually and collectively. There is absolutely no distinction in this sphere of life between a mu'min and a kafir. In fact, the same is applicable to us as well. We got two parts as well, the physical part, which is our body, and our self. And of course, if self is developed, then self is in full control of the body as well. Because the whole issue is of making choices, right choices, correct choices in the light of the permanent values. For example, if a farmer knows how to obtain the best from his land and he uses the latest scientific methods, he will get the optimum output from his fields. Similarly, if a nation spends resources on research and development and makes discoveries in various fields of science, then it can benefit from technological development through industrialization, for example, aircraft, shipping, manufacturing of all kinds of goods, transportation, weapons development, and a lot more which can be applied through this research and these discoveries. Here the Quran says that it is meant to be like this as per the Mashiach of Allah, and this is an evidence-based fact which we can witness happening in the world. So instead of saying that why these people are not destroyed who are doing batil in the world, we need to look at these laws and see how these are supposed to work in our world. And these should be looked at through gathering evidence. Those nations which have advanced ahead in this field are practically regulating the affairs of the world. And we can see that the powerful nations who have somehow acquired industrialization because they took initiative and they understood the law of cause and effect, and they worked hard, and that is why by following the physical laws, now they are dominating the world. And since they are operating under the relative values of man-made systems, hence they only think of their own self-interest. And that is important because they are following relative values. They are not following permanent values. And those who are supposed to follow permanent values, that is the holders of the Quran, they ignore these physical laws. And as a result, because they are lagging behind on the physical side, as and when they come to the Quran, they will have to again make an effort to stand on their own feet. An uphill task. Some more reflections on this verse. The other laws working in the human life are related to the development of the human self. And these are called the permanent values which are provided by the Quran, that is through Wahi of Allah. If human beings do not apply these values in the world, then essentially they cannot benefit from these values, i.e., there will be no human beings with developed selves who can regulate the affairs of the world through these values. A very important point I have tried to explain over here, that unless those people who want to utilize the permanent values and then through these permanent values somehow acquire the power in the land, then they should keep in mind that without this developed self, deen simply cannot be established. Because if they don't have that self which understands the system of deen, how can they establish something about which they have no knowledge? In the absence of such human beings, and Quran calls them mu'mineen, there will be imbalances throughout the world. Let us now analyze the verse by parts. It states first, Man kana yuridul ajilata ajjalna lahu fiha ma nasha'u liman nuridu. If anyone desires, make such choices, quick results for his efforts, then if the system permits, man-made systems encourage it. He may get these. However, if the system is based on this, then it gradually turns into a living hell for everyone. All those who willingly contribute to this system and are the beneficiaries of such a system may get the worldly benefits, but they definitely have nothing in the life of the hereafter. And when we say hereafter, their individual life might be okay and they might die peacefully, not a problem. But hereafter, when Quran points to that, it is to the collective hereafter, that is the future of people or nations in this life. Because under physical laws, ultimately, who follow the wrong system, they suffer. This aspect relates to the human psyche, which starts to assume that the life ends with death and there is no human accountability. All the poverty and deprivation in the world is related to this kind of thinking, i.e., elite has this mentality and masses just follow them blindly. Because it has a very strong effect on human psyche. Once people acquire power, then it becomes part of their psyche and they cannot think outside that kind of a psyche where resides the power and the richness, and they think that they look down upon other human beings. And when we start looking down upon other human beings, there is no question of justice coming in our mind. Expanding it further, this verse 17, 18, this fact is noted at another place. Alamu annamal hayatud dunya laibun wa lahbun wa zinatun wa tafakhurun bainakum wa takasurun fil amwali wal awlade. We can look at rest of the verse from the Quran. Addressing mu'mineen, the Quran has put the reality of the man-made systems before us. Know all of you that the life of this world is but play and amusement, pomp and mutual boasting and multiplying, competing among yourselves in riches and children. And this is the state of those who think that the life will end with death. Because balance in our thinking can only come when we come to the Quran and start following the permanent values. We can have a look at rest of this verse for the effects of creating a world based on this criteria of success. The next part of the verse sums up the outcome of this kind of pursuit. Summa jalna lahu jahannama yaslaha mazmuman madhura. This is verse 17, 18. As a consequence of following this path of self-interest, Allah has provided Jahannam for them where they will burn condemned and rejected. We need to keep in mind that though this punishment appears to be very severe, but this is the recompense for own human deeds. So wherever in the Quran there is punishment mentioned, we should keep in mind as students of the Quran that this is the consequence of our own deeds. Because Allah has clearly stated that He does not punish people. He does not do injustice to people. People do injustice to themselves. For example, whatever misery, criminality, killings, murders, mass shootings, fear, exploitation, bombing, inequality, imbalances we witness in the world, Allah does not do this. It is human beings who do to each other. The Quran asks us to understand all of this by coming to grips with the human psyche. Why I mentioned this? Because I have heard in the past from people who say that Allah is very unjust and He does not interfere in the world, why there is poverty, why there is deprivation, why there are wars. Because these kind of comments emerge, or these kind of comments are heard because people do not understand the laws working in the human world. Next verse 17, 19, the word is the arena for human beings to make their choices and witness their outcomes. وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهَا وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. Contrary to this, the nation which desires the bounties of the future together with immediate benefits, and makes such efforts for these in the way that they are meant to be made, and maintains full conviction in the permanent values, it is these people whose efforts produce full fruition both in the present as well as in the future. Further elaboration of this verse. After quoting the condition of those who think their life will end with physical death, here the Quran has mentioned those who understand both the physical laws as well as the permanent values of the Quran. This effort of theirs leads to becoming mu'mineen as they reject the man-made systems and their adverse consequences for humanity. What do? They do not aim for the immediate benefits of life because they look at every consequence possible of their own choices and deeds and decision making in the world in the light of the permanent values. And anyone who is taking into account the permanent values while making a decision cannot go wrong. Even if there are some temporary setback in the long run, such people are going to be the winners and they are going to be successful. Rather, they continuously look at the long-term outcomes of their decision making and their deeds. They come to fully realize this fact that their life has a higher purpose and that their life will not end with their physical death. They do this by coming to grips with the existence of their selves and its development. They keep in mind the life of the hereafter and direct their efforts with the permanent values in front of them. They recognize and appreciate the existence of their latent potentials and strive to bring these out using the Quranic guidance. They set a lofty aim of establishing the system of Deen by becoming companions of Allah. And since these efforts of theirs have divine approval, i.e. of His laws, hence their efforts bear full fruition and nothing is held back from their reward. Next verse 17-20, Allah's bounties are available for everyone in the world. Kullan numiddu haulai wa haulai min atai rabbika wa ma kana atau rabbika mahzura. In this way, we keep advancing both groups, i.e. those who only desire immediate benefits and those who desire immediate benefits together with the bounties of the future, as per our physical laws according to their efforts. And the means of sustenance bestowed by your Rabb is kept freely available for all of them. And this is part of the system of Rububiyyat, that even when the system of Deen is established, Jamaat-e-Mu'mineen over there have to keep in mind that they cannot restrict means of sustenance for any human being, even if they do not agree with the Quranic value system, because that is made available by Allah to everyone. No obstacles to anyone are erected in its path. Whatever can be acquired through physical laws, it can be acquired by each one of those persons who makes the effort to acquire it according to that law. In this race of life, the arena remains equally open to both kafir and mu'min. It does not happen that a kafir is grabbed and pushed back despite his effort, and that a mu'min is advanced forward even if he makes no effort. And we can see that working in the world, that anyone who makes an effort within the system and knows how to make effort, they do acquire more means of sustenance. The question which comes before us is the distribution of these means of sustenance. The meanings of the Quran volume 1, what I have done is I have taken some copied from this book which has been published, which relates to this verse. Whether kafir or mu'min, we keep taking both forward according to their efforts and endeavors. Both have our support and favor. We never do this that we allow one party to advance and place a barrier before the other so that it cannot go beyond it. Doing this is against our law of Mashiach. Material benefits have been bestowed on all human beings from us as a blessing, and such a situation should never arise in a blessing that it is given to one while another is deprived of it. So this is where the distribution of these means of sustenance comes in, and that is where the system of Deen is required, because human beings without the system of Deen will always resort to injustice and cruelty in the world. The means of sustenance have been provided to the whole of mankind as a blessing, and this arena is open to all equally. To whatever extent someone makes an effort, he will reap the fruit of this accordingly. Those things which are bestowed freely from Allah for the benefit of the whole of creation without any effort or payment and without any recompense, no one has the right to place a barrier on them. They should remain continuously flowing like water. They should remain freely available to meet the requirements of every needy one equally. The means of sustenance are for the use of everyone, quoting another verse. وَجَعَلَ فِيهَا رَوَاسِيَ مِنْ فَوْقِهَا وَبَارَكَ فِيهَا وَقَدَّرَ فِيهَا أَقْوَاتَهَا فِي أَرْبَعَةِ أَيَّامٍ سَوَاءً لِلسَّائِلِينَ. Allah has created this earth in such a way that through the mountains He has established the system of irrigation. The potential has been kept in the soil so that it produces crops. Then defined the seasons through its rotation so that different crops are produced in different parts of the year according to them. The aim of this whole system was so that the produce of the earth remains equally available for meeting the needs of all those who are needy. The doors should not be closed to anyone. When this remains within the possession of Allah, which means when it remains within the possession and the control of Jamaat-e-Momineen under the system of Deen, then this purpose will continue to become accomplished. But if it is passed into private ownership, that is the capitalist system, then this purpose will not be served. Now let us go to the next verse, 1721. Keep in view the life of the hereafter when organizing human affairs. Anzur kaifa faddalna ba'dahum ala ba'din walal akhiratu akbaru darajatin wa akbaru tafdila. This is that immutable law according to which you can see how one nation achieves superiority over another nation due to its efforts and actions in the acquisition of the means of sustenance. So this is the application of the physical law, because in physical law, whichever nation is powerful, they are going to grab a bigger share of it. The point at which they become differentiated is in the issue of the bounties of the future, i.e., which system is ultimately the possessor of prosperous results in this world, and following this life, who also advances in the life of the hereafter. For this, other than physical laws, another law is established which is obtained through Wahi. The nation which achieves the prosperities of the future in this way is the one whose ranks are lofty, and it is the one which has superiority over the others. Loftiness in ranks and the criterion for eminence is that the present condition of the nation should be prosperous, and the future should be bright too. And of course, for this, we have to make effort. Further elaboration of this verse. If we approach this verse superficially, then it appears as if Allah has given superiority to one nation over another, and this leads to accusing Him, that is Allah, for all that goes on in the world. This contributes to the belief of Taqdeer. The verse is translated as, "See how we bestowed more on some than on others, but verily the hereafter is more in rank and gradation and more in excellence." So if we read it like that and do not correlate with other verses, that is where human beings are made accountable, then people can take different impressions and they get a support for the belief of Taqdeer. There is nothing pre-decided. Everything is in our hands. If we make right choices, we'll get right results. With this kind of translation, it appears that we can leave this world and its affairs to others, as this is what Allah has done, and who can dare to go against His will and verdict? Such an assumption and understanding is in total opposition to the functioning of the law of requital, other verses of the Quran, and the presenting evidence in the Word. We see that those nations which have acquired supremacy in the physical domain, we can discover every single reason for it. False beliefs based on dogmas of the religion take away the ability to reflect, and people find all kinds of false explanations for such verses by picking one here and there, because they want to prove their own point of view and want to strengthen their own false beliefs. And for that, human beings can justify anything. In order to justify the wrong conclusions drawn from these translations to justify their own wrongs. Material successes acquired through man-made systems should never be attributed as a blessing of Allah. Let us analyze this verse in two parts. And these kind of belief systems have been used in the past by Mulukiyat to subjugate masses. And religious clergy also made use of it. And this is going on even in today's world in those countries which are dominated by various religions. The same verse 1721 quotes from the human self. What I've done is I've taken some quotes from this book of Allama Pervez. The superiority of rizq over one another is not because of qismat or taqdeer, it is the outcome of the efforts and deeds of human beings themselves. In this connection, we have noted a number of verses from the Quran in the previous pages. It is important to reiterate a few among these. For example, see verses 17 to 21 of Surah Bani-Israel, in which it is stated that the individual who desires the immediate benefits of the word and strives for these, we give him immediate benefits. The one who together with these also wishes to acquire the prosperities of the hereafter and strives for this, he achieves the bounties of both this life and the hereafter. We keep advancing both according to their efforts and deeds. We have not placed any obstructions on the path that one group is stopped and the other group is allowed to go forward. And this is what it means, Anzur kaifa faddalna ba'dahum ala ba'din. The emphasis here is on how, kaifa, i.e., though there is a differentiation and risk between different groups, you should try to analyze how did this difference become created. Details of this have been given in the first verse, i.e., this occurred because of the efforts and deeds of these groups. Allah did not do this, that one group is stopped and the other is allowed to advance freely. Have you noted how that same verse from the wrong meaning of which the doctrine of Qismat and Taqdeer is invented is refuting this belief? Further reflections on this verse. Now let us look at the second part of the verse, i.e., وَلَلْ آخِرَاتُ أَكْبَرُ دَرَجَاتٍ وَأَكْبَرُ تَفْضِيلًا. And those who strive in the word by keeping in mind the long-term effects of their efforts, the life of the hereafter based on deen, they not only reap the benefits of this life, they also acquire the benefits of the hereafter. This is something which is based on evidence. The existing man-made system of sustenance is based on the exploitation of others, i.e., the weak and the poor. There is no equitable distribution of risk as the relative value which is being followed is might is right. The rich and powerful nations continue to exploit the poor and weak, and the capitalist system and its laws legitimize all these wrongdoings. Without the guidance of the Quran, even underdeveloped nations themselves think that what rich nations are doing is perfectly legal and legitimate, and they also try to become like the rich and powerful nations. So that way, the race goes on, and nobody is ready to pause and reflect and say, wait a minute, what is going on in the world? So that they in turn can exploit other people. Who is going to stop this? I don't think UNO, the Security Council, and all these organizations can stop it. The last verse of today's presentation, 1722, all man-made systems lead to creating imbalances and chaos in the world. La taj'al ma'allahi ilahan akhara fataq'uda mazmuman makhzula. For this, it is essential that you should accept the authority and law of one Allah alone. And we have gone through this aspect of shirk in previously as well, that any mixing in the Quranic value system amounts to shirk. And shirk means that the whole formula will become contaminated. And then we cannot get those results which are meant to be obtained by following the Quran. Do not include anyone else in his rule. Do not do this, that in physical life you operate in accordance with the divine laws, that is, laws of nature, while you keep your communal life under the obedience of self-created laws. Nor keep these divine laws confined merely to ethics, and by ignoring the laws of physical life, practice monasticism. In both these situations, the consequence will be that in the arena of life, like reviled people, you will be left behind others in humiliation and disgrace, because this affects human psyche. And when human psyche is affected, as we know, then outer world will also be affected. And if our psyche is contaminated by all kinds of false beliefs, then we can never ever get those results which we can get by following the Quran. Quran wants unity of thought, and that unity of thought can only be obtained through Iman in the Quranic value system. Further elaboration of this verse, we know that the Quran continuously reminds us to follow its guidance in totality and not piecemeal. For example, in verse 285, it states that فَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضٍ. You have Iman in one aspect of the book and discard the other, i.e., what is in line with your unbridled desires, you follow that, and the other which goes against your desires, you reject. What is the consequence of this? That is, what is the consequence of following this kind of a path where you follow one part of the Quran and you reject the other, and which suits you? You follow that path which suits you. When you want to turn the people out of their homes, it suits you. And then you go and think that by bringing them back to their homes from where you turned them out first is charity, and you want to earn swab, and that is what Quran says is wrong. So first you establish the wrong system, you create yatim and miskin, and then you go out and do charitable work and think that you will get Jannat in the hereafter. فَمَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ إِلَّا خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ. And that is the second part of this verse 285. The recompense for this humiliation in this worldly life, and when the results of doing this will materialize in later life, it will lead to severe punishment. People, when we go through the Quran, and most people do not realize that the life at human self's level continues beyond death. They always look at the Quran even, and I've seen people for worldly benefits. Somehow they think that they will be able to please Allah by reading the Quran, and this will help them to get more material benefits. Their minds do not go towards the system of deen, and their mind does not go towards what is happening in the outer world, particularly those human beings who are being killed and murdered and being made yatim and miskin, and children are being turned into orphans, and all kinds of evil going on in the world. In this verse, by stating La taj'al ma'allahi ilahan akhara, not to associate any other being whose laws you may follow, as this will lead to disaster on many counts. Firstly, by virtue of possessing a self with choice and intent, we are simply not meant to follow the laws made by other human beings exactly like us. We need to convince ourselves to accept Allah with all His attributes as a model for ourselves. And for this, we need that concept of Him which is noted in the Quran. Few more comments on this verse. Secondly, once we have recognized this aspect and its importance, we need to acquire Iman, recognizing the presence of a self as an entity within us. We need to raise its eminence and loftiness in order to understand the importance of the Quran's value system. This will help us to invite others to this and to be able to explain to them. Thirdly, we should acquire as much knowledge as possible about man-made systems in the world and understand their weaknesses and strengths. For example, technology, industry, services, the values on which these are based, their adverse effects on humanity across the world. Fourthly, during this period of education, training, and gathering expertise, join with those who are also motivated enough to pursue this path defined by the Quran. This is not a path for a lonely man to follow. Deen is about coming together and then working together, trying to go through the Quran and make the Quranic value system as part of ourself. Because unless it becomes part of ourself, part of our psyche, we cannot achieve anything. Fifthly, continue these efforts of working together to take own comprehension to that high level by evaluating against the signs and criteria of the Quran. Patiently and steadfastly keep developing self through solid deeds. And this path needs tremendous amount of patience and steadfastness, and a very firm iman that the path being followed and checked by the criteria of the Quranic value system is the correct one. And by comparing it with what is happening around the world, and then looking at the changes, the transformation which takes place within our own psyche. And that becomes an evidence in itself that our path is right. Finally, few general comments on these verses. We know that in numerous verses, Allah has related the actions which are carried out by the mu'mineen and other human beings to Himself. We should understand that these are related to the relevant law of Allah. Very important, otherwise, we will also fall into some kind of a wrong belief that as if Allah is directly interfering in this world. Allah does not interfere in this world directly. He works through His laws, and we need to understand the laws, and the whole Quran is about laws. The Quran's addresses the human intellect and reasoning, and its language and presentation style is such that it assists the ones seeking guidance to bring out their latent potentials to the best of their ability in life. Mu'mineen as voluntary companions of Allah, and Quran has stated, Allahu waliyul lazina amanu yukhrijuhum minal zulumati ilan nur, that Allah is the companion of those who have acquired Iman, and He brings them out of the darknesses of life into light, are meant to relate all these potentials, abilities, and solid deeds to Allah, who has bestowed these for a higher purpose. And this is an important point because I added this slide at the end, because if we pause and reflect on this aspect, that why Allah is relating to Himself and why He wants mu'mineen to understand it, because it is mu'mineen who relate their own abilities, their own psyche, their own potentials back to Allah that He has given us. And if we remember, we have gone through this aspect that only hard work which we put in is ours. And we relate it to Allah as well because we are using His resources. Our body is given by Him, our intellect is given by Him, our self is given by Him. So that is how we have to relate to it. Otherwise, for someone who does not believe in the Quran, these things will never make sense. It is only mu'mineen who will take over those responsibilities which Allah has taken on Himself, and we have to deliver those responsibilities in His word for the good of whole of mankind. And since the mu'mineen need to acquire a new psyche which is then enabled to carry out these tasks, hence they need to relate their thoughts and deeds to Allah, that is to His laws. Interestingly, those who do not wish to be His companions relate these verses to their qismat so that they do not have to do anything in this life because it suits them. If we see all those people who believe in qismat and quote qismat as well, for their own interests, they are very efficient and they will do anything to acquire those benefits of the material world and, of course, the man-made system. But once it comes to helping others and trying to work for the system of deen, they will say it is their qismat because it is an easy cop-out and can accuse Allah for all their follies and failures. We need to continually reflect on every verse within the overall context of the system of deen so that our best is manifested in our thoughts and actions. For example, in this verse, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا إِن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Bring your wishes, that is choices and decisions, in line with the will of Allah. And then see how Allah's attributes, that is permanent values, help you to come to grips with Rububiyyat as a system. And thank you very much. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of deen. Thank you.